I have incredible respect for those who are willing to put on our nation's uniform and stand opposed and stand in defense of our lives, of our liberty, of our country. And I have a great deal of contempt when would-be little military rogue dictators think they are actually in charge and they know what's best. Meet Alexander Vindman, a mid-level ranking, I guess you would say, politician in an army uniform. He got to where he is not by acts of valor and courageousness and decisive leadership. He got there because of pedigree and personality and, shall we say, positioning of his nasal inhaling passage to the gluteus maximus of those who outrank them in an effort to gain their favor. Was that clear? Because we certainly got to know Mr. Vindman today as he testified in The Circus Continues, the impeachment lynch mob.
Two individuals that were not in the White House.
Not in the White House, cleared U.S. government officials with appropriate need to know.
And what agencies were these officials with?
Department of State Deputy Assistant Secretary George Kent, who is responsible for the portfolio Eastern Europe, including Ukraine, and a individual from the office of an individual in the intelligence community.
As you know, the intelligence community has 17 different agencies. What agency was this individual from?
If I could interject here, we don't want to use these proceedings.
It's our time,
I know,
Chair.
but we need to protect the whistleblower.
Please stop.
I want to make sure that there's no effort to out the whistleblower through the use of these proceedings. If the witness has a good faith belief that this may reveal the identity of the whistleblower, that is not the purpose that we are here for, and I want to advise the witness accordingly.
Decisive military leader who takes the Fifth Amendment, who says, oh, I can't say that. And then, of course, it's little Adam Shifty Schiff to the rescue. Yes, Adam Shiftless, who is hell-bent now. We are never to know who the whistleblower is. And if you refer to Representative Elise Stefanik, she did a fantastic job on Friday listing out all of the things that Adam Schiff said going into this process of how important the testimony, the credibility of the whistleblower will be to this whole process. And now all of a sudden, we can't know who he is. We can't have a name. We can't know where it is that he serves. And yet, I think what happened here today, and we'll see how many other people, we know the mainstream media won't connect these dots for you. We certainly know the Democrats won't connect these dots for you. We'll see how many people, even in conservative media, catch on to what actually happened today. I know what they were expecting. They were expecting a lot of fireworks and for this guy to cave like he did under secret deposition. That didn't really happen, but there were some really good holes punched in his story today. But something else happened that we'll get into through the process of this monologue, and that's this. There is now a connection, that military connection, to what has been this soft coup against the President of the United States. Enter this mid-level, mid-ranking, postier-sniffing military man, Alexander Vindman. And he's so pompous.
Mr. Vindman, you testified in your deposition that you did not know the whistleblower.
Ranking member, it's Lieutenant Colonel Vindman, please.
There's another title that pops into my head. There would have been a time I wouldn't have said it because my mother was still alive and might have watched this and would have been disappointed in me for talking like that. But I'll just say it. He's a prick. I mean, he is just an absolute prick.
You testified in the deposition that you did not know who the whistleblower was, or is.
I do not know who the whistleblower is. That is
How is it possible for you to name these people and then out the whistleblower?
per the advice of my counsel. I've been advised not to answer specific questions about members of the intelligence community.
Are you aware that this is the Intelligence Committee that's conducting an impeachment hearing?
Of course I am.
Wouldn't the appropriate place for you to come to testify would be the Intelligence Committee about someone within the intelligence community?
Ranking member, per the advice of my counsel and the instructions from the chairman, I've been advised not to provide any specifics on who I've spoken to inside the intelligence community. What I can offer is that these were properly cleared individuals, or was a properly cleared individual with a need to know.
Well, this is, I mean, you can plead the fifth, but you're here to answer questions, and you're here under subpoena. So you can either answer the question or you can plead the fifth.
Nunes makes an outstanding and incredibly logical point here. Well, if you don't know who the whistleblower is, how can you out him? I mean, how do you give away the secret identity of Batman if you don't know who Bruce Wayne is? If you are friends with Bruce Wayne but don't know he's Batman and you talk about Bruce Wayne, are you actually outing Batman if you don't know it? I mean, it's a great logical point. And then to say to Adam Schiff, how do you know who the whistleblower is? You claim you don't know who it is. So how do you know if we've outed him or not? And we have here the connection, and I'm waiting to see if anybody else in conservative media has picked up on this, because we certainly know the lying legacy, corporate, corrupt, mainstream propaganda machine that calls itself the media, which is nothing more than state-run TV, and in this case it would be the deep state, oligarch, ruling class elect, part and parcel with the Democrats, which you just might as well call them what they are, the Socialist Communist Party of the United States. And they're going to tell you what you need to know, what they want you to know, what they want you to think. That's all they're going to do. So we know they're not going to tell us and explain what we just saw happen. I'll explain it. Now, he was asked directly, Mr. Vindman, and no, I won't call him Colonel. Mr. Vindman was asked directly, have you leaked? Have you leaked? And he repeatedly said, no, I have not leaked. But he talked to somebody that he knew would leak. You know, it's kind of like when James Comey, you remember him, when Jimmy Comey, when he got fired and he took his secret files and his memos and his notes and he gave it to someone that he knew would give it to the New York Times so that he could continue to feign and be this man of utmost integrity. I leaked nothing. Somebody else did it for me. Because we needed a special prosecutor. We needed a special investigator, and I knew this would trigger it. Although it had already been set up because his best buddy in the whole world, Bobby Mueller, got it. Now, that all said, Vindman listens to the phone call. He immediately talks to a half a dozen people about it that he claims all had the right security clearance. We'll see about that. But he purposely talked to someone that he knew would talk. What they did not count on was the president releasing the transcript. Now, we're hearing in the lying legacy, corporate, corrupt, mainstream media and Democrats regurgitating their talking points, this continual connection, and even Nancy Botox Pelosi has said, why, this is like Watergate, only it's worse. It makes everything that Nixon did pale in comparison. Well, let's talk about that for a moment. First of all, Nixon didn't actually do anything. It was people within Nixon's world thinking they were helping the president and doing opposition research, broke into the Watergate hotel, into the Democratic offices, looking for dirt on their opponents. Nixon did not find out about it until after the fact. Even rabid Democrats will admit that. What Nixon did, though, was he tried to cover up what his cronies did on his behalf. And there became the entire Watergate investigation. I've been telling you that when you hear Sam Donaldson and his really bad toupees over on the Don Lemon show on CNN, Airport Terminal TV, and you hear the Dan Rathers and you hear, Woodward, talk continually about Watergate. Remember what you're dealing with. You're dealing with old men in their late 70s, who the last time they were really important and relevant was during Watergate. They were the reporters that cracked the case and delivered the goods and got rid of a sitting conservative U.S. president. And it was during that culmination of Vietnam and liberalism becoming out of the closet and open in our politics. And I mean, this was for the people, that hippie liberal rebellion. And this is what the Dan Rathers and the Sam Donaldsons, this is what they rose to claim and fame on. And for the next 25 years after that, that was the reason they got the big news desks and got to anchor the big newscasts on the big networks and were given all this incredible credibility, and it was what they made their chops on. It's like a famous singer. Well, he may have been around and in the business for 30, 40 years, but the truth is, there was a time when he was young where he had about 2 or 3 years where he had a string of hits and then no hits after that. But the hits were just big enough at the time. He's been able to live the rest of his life regurgitating and re-singing and re-recording those same hits that he first recorded 25, 30 years ago when they hit the top 40. And he's got just enough facial still recognition that, he can get gigs in TV commercials and cameo appearances on TV programs and, spots on Dancing with the Stars and, or be a judge on Some Americans Might Have Talent, Maybe. Look, this guy can burp his name in 4 languages. And that's now their claim to fame. And that's the same with the Dan Rathers and the Sam Donaldsons. Their chops were earned during Watergate. Then they lived off the Watergate fame for the next 20, 30 years. Now they're drooling, dripping, leaking old men who, if they don't have Depends on, they will embarrass themselves in public. And they are trying so hard again to be relevant and recapture their youth that they want to call this impeachment inquiry Watergate 2.0. And that Donald Trump is worse than Richard Nixon. Now, remember what Richard Nixon did, because it was the cover-up. And what did he do for the cover-up? He used the arsenal of the United States government and the intel communities to go after the people that were trying to expose the break into Watergate. So there is some Watergate going on today. But who is it that's actually using the arsenal of the government and the intel community to cover up what happened in Ukraine? It's not Donald Trump. It's Joe Biden and Nancy Pelosi and people like Lieutenant Colonel Alexander Vindman. See, they all got caught with their money in the Ukraine till, pulling out all kinds of money. Donald Trump walks in the room, turns the light on, says, "What's going on in here?" And they all point to him and say, "Hey, stop stealing from Ukraine." And they're trying to convince you and I we're not seeing what we see. Do you understand that? This is the coup attempt now in this whole Ukrainian farce of a witch hunt. Now, that all said, that all explained, Jim Jordan, in rare form, goes after Mr. Vindman, and again, here comes Adam Schiff for brains to the rescue.
how many other people are in that group of people you communicated with outside the 4 individuals I just named?
Yes, Mr. Jordan, on call readout, certainly after the first call, there were probably a half a dozen or more people that I read out. Those are people with the proper clearance and the need to know. In this case, because of the sensitivity of the call and Mr. Eisenberg told me not to speak to anybody else, I only read out, outside of the NSC, 2 individuals.
2 individuals.
Das Kent and one other person.
And you're not willing to tell us who that other individual is?
Mr. Chairman, point of order.
Mr. Chairman.
Mr. Chairman, point of order.
The gentleman suspend. Counsel.
Mr. Chairman, I would ask you to enforce the rule with regard to the disclosure with regard to the intelligence officer.
Thank you, counsel. You know, as I indicated before, this committee will not be used to out the whistleblower. That same
Mr. Chairman,
necessity
can you first stop the time so I don't lose the
will
time?
persist. You are recognized again, Mr. Jordan.
Mr. Chairman, I don't see how this is outing the whistleblower. The witness has testified in his deposition that he doesn't know who the whistleblower is. You have said, even though no one believes you, you have said you don't know who the whistleblower is. So how is this outing the whistleblower to find out who this individual is?
Mr. Jordan, this is your time for questioning. You can use it any way you like, but your question should be addressed to the
And I'd like
witness.
to-
And your question should not be addressed to trying to out the whistleblower.
Well, okay.
No one believes you. And that's true. Nobody believes Adam Schiffless. Liberals don't believe Adam Schiffless. Jimmy Dore on YouTube, and you need to watch Jimmy Dore's channel. Yes, he is a leftist. He is a progressive leftist. But I have respect for Jimmy Dore, and I'll tell you why. He believes what he believes. He's not going to change it. He's not driven with the polls. He's wrong, but he believes what he believes. And I respect that, which is why I can no longer respect businesses like Chick-fil-A. Huh? Where'd that mental jump come from? 5 years ago, I, along with hundreds of thousands of other Christian conservatives in this country, took a day to fight back in defense of Chick-fil-A, and we all converged on our local Chick-fil-A's, and I mean, traffic was backed up for miles at Chick-fil-A's all over the country. Why were we doing that to support them? Because the LGBTQ community and the bullying political lobby that they have called for a national boycott of Chick-fil-A because they're anti-gay and they support anti-gay groups. And it was the Christians who kept not only the lights on at Chick-fil-A, but made them from that point forward the fastest growing fast food chain in the country. And how do they say thank you? By announcing yesterday they will no longer fund any what they consider to be anti-LGBTQ charities. And they specifically mentioned Salvation Army and the Fellowship of Christian Athletes. So as the Santa Clauses get ready to ring the bells to take care of poor, hungry families this holiday season, remember, you're giving money to a hate group. That's according to Chick-fil-A. I'm done with Chick-fil-A. I spit on Chick-fil-A. I'm serious. I spit on Chick-fil-A. I can't stand that kind of stuff. Stand up. Stand firm on what you believe. Unbelievable. So I respected Jimmy Dore because he stands for what he believes. And even Jimmy Dore is absolutely just beside himself of how much of a liar, how discredited Adam Schiff actually is. That said, Elise Stefanik, once again, and she does it very steadily and methodically, and she doesn't engage in fireworks unless Adam Schiff brings them to her, and she won't run from them. She absolutely threads the needle, and she makes the direct connection between corruption and Obama's involvement and Obama's concern where the Bidens were concerned. And then ultimately this was about corruption, not political favor.
And Lieutenant Colonel Vindman, would you agree that this focus on anti-corruption is a critical aspect of our policy towards Ukraine?
I would.
And Lieutenant Colonel Vindman, you are aware that in 2014, during the Obama administration, the first anti-corruption investigation partnered between the U.S., the U.K., and Ukraine was into the owner of the company Burisma.
I'm aware of it now.
And Lieutenant Colonel Vindman, you testified that you were aware that Braemer had questionable business dealings. That's part of its track record.
That is correct.
You also testified that regarding Braemer, money laundering, tax evasion comports with your understanding of how business is done in Ukraine. Is that correct?
I'm not aware of specific incidents, but my understanding is that it would not be out of the realm of the possible for Braemer.
Well, that's page 207 from your testimony, but I'll move on. You are aware that Hunter Biden did sit on the board of Braemer at this time?
I am.
Well, I know that my constituents in New York 21 have many concerns about the fact that Hunter Biden, the son of the vice president, sat on the board of a corrupt company like Braemer. The Obama administration, State Department, was also concerned, and yet Adam Schiff refuses to allow this committee to call Hunter Biden despite our requests. Every witness who has testified and has been asked this has answered yes. Do you agree that Hunter Biden on the board of Braemer has the potential for the appearance of a conflict of interest?
Certainly the potential, yes.
And Ms. Williams?
Yes.
Now, shifting to the legal requirements that our aid to Ukraine is conditioned on anti-corruption, Lieutenant Colonel Vindman, you testified that you understood that Congress had passed, under the Ukrainian Security Assistance Initiative, a legal obligation to certify that corruption is being addressed.
That is correct.
And you also testified that it is required by the National Defense Authorization Act.
That is correct.
So for the public listening, we are not just talking about President Trump focusing on anti-corruption in Ukraine, but it is so critical, so important that hard-earned taxpayer dollars, when given to foreign nations, that by law, overwhelmingly bipartisan support requires anti-corruption in Ukraine in order to get U.S. taxpayer-funded aid.
And you have to absolutely love in her follow-up, she asks point blank and gets him to admit under oath, because remember now, he's one of their big witnesses, he actually heard the phone call, even though we have the transcript. And he's trying to backpedal on what the phone call was about, and won't tell us, everybody, that he leaked it to. She asks him under oath. Under oath. Did President Obama ever give Ukraine military aid? No. Did President Trump? Yes. Now, why is that important? Because it takes us right back to when Joe Biden said to the government of Ukraine, if you don't fire the investigator looking into my son's company, you will not get your $1 billion in aid. There's bribery. That's an impeachable offense. They fired the investigator, and the Obama administration never gave Ukraine $1 billion. But Trump did, and gave them military help.
Lieutenant Colonel Vindman, you spoke extensively about the importance of defensive lethal aid to Ukraine, specifically javelins. This was in your deposition.
Correct.
And you testified that the Javelin in particular, because of its effectiveness in terms of influencing the Russian decision calculus for aggression, it is one of the most important tools we have when it comes to providing defensive lethal aid.
The system itself and the signaling of U.S. support, yes.
And it is a fact that that aid was provided under President Trump and not President Obama.
That is correct.
And then finally, in a very subtle way, Elise Stefanik gets Mr. Vindman to make the ultimate admission.
And my last question, Lieutenant Colonel Vindman, I know you serve at the NSC in the White House. I served in the West Wing of the White House for President Bush on the Domestic Policy Council and in the Chief of Staff's office, so I'm very familiar with the policy process. I also know that as a staff member, the person who sets the policy of the United States is the president, not the staff. And you testified that the president sets the policy, correct?
That is correct.
And I respect your deep expertise, your tremendous service to our country. We can never repay those that have worn the military uniform and served our nation. But I was struck when you testified in your deposition. I would say, first of all, I'm the director for Ukraine. I'm responsible for Ukraine. I'm the most knowledgeable. I'm the authority for Ukraine, for the National Security Council, and the White House. I just want a clarification. You report to Tim Morrison, correct?
In my
Your
advisory...
direct report is Tim Morrison,
in
correct?
my advisory, just to clarify, only in my advisory capacity, I advise up through the chain of command. That's what I do.
And the chain of command is Tim Morrison to Ambassador John Bolton, the National Security Advisor to the President of the United States.
Correct. Mm-hmm.
And do you agree that the President sets the policy as Commander-in-Chief, as you testified previously?
Absolutely.
She walks him through a series of questions where he has to rate himself in this inner circle of the intelligence community, that it's their job to make sure that American foreign policy is followed. Our policy, because we're the nerds. Our policy. She gets him to admit under oath that, number one, he's very low level in all of this. She gets him to say, yes, it's the president. It's the president. But what she's really nailing him for is you and the rest of the intelligence community that has worked to try to undo a duly elected president. Your biggest problem is, even though the president has the right to bring in what ambassadors he wants, even though he has the right to set whatever the American foreign policy is going to be, how dare the president be the president? Hey, that's it for this little rant. Thank you so much for watching. Make sure you give us a thumbs up and a big like. Share this to your social media platforms. Make sure you're a subscriber. I have even more people telling me, Pastor Marty, you have no idea how badly you are being shadow banned right now. Please, what you need to do is highlight the link up in your browser and then share that link as you comment on other videos around YouTube. Put it in your comments as a link so that we can get the word out that we're here. We're alive, even though YouTube is trying to suppress us.